Ever feel that, like, super unwelcome grab in the back of your thigh right when you're hitting your stride?
Uh,
Hamstring injuries,
the worst.
they're just the worst, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's like they happen to everyone.
Yeah.
Weekend warriors, seasoned athletes, you name it.
Absolutely. It's incredibly common. And honestly, it's kind of a mystery, even still.
Right? It's like, what is the deal with these things? So today, we are diving into some research that honestly, like, totally changed how we understand hamstring injuries, especially if you're someone who loves to sprint.
Okay.
Or, maybe you just want to know why those hamstrings are so prone to causing trouble.
Yeah. This 2008 research paper, actually, it won a top prize at the European Athletics Innovation Awards.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're talking like the best of the best here.
Absolutely.
And get this, one of the things they found, it could totally change how hamstring injuries are diagnosed.
Really?
Yeah, potentially saving you from a super pricey MRI.
See, that's what I like to hear. But let's rewind a little. This research, they zeroed in on sprinters specifically.
Great.
They really wanted to understand why these athletes are so vulnerable to hamstring injuries.
Well, because sprinting is like basically asking for a hamstring strain, isn't it?
Yeah,
You're putting so much force on those muscles.
exactly. And it turns out one particular hamstring muscle, the biceps femoris longhand,
Oh, here we go.
we'll call it BFLA for short.
BMLA got it.
It's the biggest troublemaker of them all.
Okay, so the BFLH is causing all the problems. What makes this muscle so prone to injury, especially during sprinting?
It all comes down to, I think, really the biomechanics of it. Imagine launching your body forward at top speed, right?
Yeah.
Your BFLH is working overtime to, one, propel you forward, but then two, to control all of that movement at the same time.
Right.
It's under a ton of strain. And this study really uncovered just how vulnerable that makes it.
So we have to talk about this whole proximal free tendon thing, because this research uncovered something kind of major, like really groundbreaking.
Yeah, for sure. So the proximal free tendon, think of it like the anchor point.
Okay,
It's where your BFLH muscle attaches to your sitting bone.
gotcha.
What the study found was if you injure this tendon,
Yeah.
your recovery time, it just skyrockets. It's way longer.
Oh, wow. And honestly, most people probably don't even realize this tendon is a thing,
Right.
let alone that it plays a big part in hamstring
It's
injuries.
true. It's so true. We usually just think muscle strain,
Yeah.
Oh, I pulled my hamstring. But this research really highlighted how crucial that proximal free tendon is for the entire recovery process.
So understanding that tendon involvement, it could totally change how we approach these hamstring injuries. But here's where it gets really interesting to me, and maybe this is like my inner skeptic coming out this study found that carefully feeling for the injury's location,
Okay.
what doctors call palpation,
Right.
it was as accurate as an MRI in predicting recovery time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, hold on a second. Before everyone cancels their MRI appointments, it's really important to remember. This study, they were focused on predicting recovery time.
Okay, so not necessarily diagnosing the actual injury itself.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So you're saying palpation could be a really powerful tool, especially early on.
Precisely. Imagine, you could get a sense of how long your recovery might take without needing an expensive scan right away.
That would be huge,
Yeah.
especially for athletes who are, itching to get back in the game.
Exactly. And this is where the studies focus on sprinters. It gets even more interesting. Remember, they were looking at the location of the injury within that BFLA muscle
Right.
and how that location impacted recovery.
Okay, so the closer the injury was to that proximal free tendon, that anchor point we talked about, the longer it took to heal.
You got it. And what's remarkable is this was true even when they looked at things like the size of the injury.
Interesting. So it's not just about how bad the injury looks, say, on a scan.
Right.
It's about where it actually is on the muscle itself.
Exactly. Location, location, location.
Wow. This is giving me so much to think about the next time I feel that, like, little twinge in my hamstring.
And don't forget about palpation. The researchers, they found it was even more accurate in predicting recovery time for injuries that were close to that ischial tuberosity.
So a skilled practitioner, they could potentially feel the hamstring, pinpoint the most painful spot, and get a pretty good sense of what that recovery timeline might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Really highlights how important that hands-on assessment can be.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about injury location. We've talked about the power of palpation. But this study, they didn't stop there. They actually tracked the healing process within the muscle itself over time. What did they find?
One of the, I think, most surprising findings was that even after 6 weeks, many of the sprinters still showed signs of the injury on their MRIs.
6 weeks. Wow. Okay, I'm going to guess that challenges the traditional thinking about hamstring injury recovery a little bit.
Definitely. Definitely. But here's the kicker. Even though the MRIs were showing those, kind of lingering signs, a lot of those athletes weren't feeling pain anymore.
Wait, so their bodies were telling them they were good to go, but the MRIs are showing something different.
Exactly.
Wow. That's wild. It's like those objective measures, like an MRI, they don't always tell a whole story.
Exactly. And that's why this research placed such a strong emphasis on listening to your body. They found that a lot of the athletes they intuitively knew when they were truly ready to return to their sport,
Right.
even if the scans or the strength tests weren't quite there yet.
It's that whole mind-body connection, right?
Yes.
Trusting your instincts, not pushing yourself beyond your limits.
And this study suggests that those instincts are often spot on.
It really is.
Yeah.
This is like reminding me of that one time I pushed myself too soon after a hamstring injury. I thought I was good to go.
Oh.
Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, we've all been there. It's a good reminder we're not just a collection of body parts.
Yeah.
We're complex beings, and we all have these very unique healing journeys.
So true. Okay, but all this talk about sprinters, does this research apply to those of us who aren't exactly, hitting the track at lightning speed?
That is a great question, and it's something the researchers actually addressed. While this study focused on those elite sprinters, they actually do think that their findings have implications for anyone who's dealing with a hamstring injury.
Really?
Yeah, because even though the forces and demands on our hamstrings might be a little bit different,
Right.
those underlying mechanisms of injury and healing,
Yeah.
they're similar.
So that means understanding the importance of injury location, the potential of palpation, the power of that mind-body connection, all of that is relevant, even if we're not, professional athletes.
Absolutely. And it really highlights how important it is to seek out assessment and treatment from a qualified healthcare professional who understands all of these nuances.
Someone who takes the time to, really listen to your body, assess your movement, use their hands to pinpoint the problem.
It's about that holistic approach to care. You're not just treating an isolated injury, you're treating the whole person.
I love that. It sounds like this research really opened up this whole new understanding of hamstring injuries, but I'm sure it also raised some new questions along the way.
It definitely did. One of the most, I think, intriguing findings was this disconnect between those objective measures of recovery, the MRIs and the strength tests, and the subjective experience of the athletes.
Right. Like how those sprinters still had signs of the injury on their MRI, even though they felt fine.
Exactly. It really suggests there's just like a lot more to understanding hamstring injury recovery than simply looking at scans or measuring strength.
So much of it seems to come back to tuning into those subtle cues from your body
Yes.
and trusting your instincts about when you're truly ready to return to activity.
And that's a message that resonates far beyond the world of just elite athletics.
Right.
It's about empowering people to really become active participants in their own healing journey.
I love that. This has been seriously eye-opening. It really makes you realize how much we take those hamstrings for granted, right?
Wait till they decide to grab our attention, right?
Seriously. But hey, this research, at least it gave us some good insights, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sure it probably also raised some new questions too.
Oh, for sure. One of the most, I think, intriguing findings was just this disconnect between those objective measures of recovery, the MRIs, the strength tests, and then just the subjective experience of the athletes.
Right, exactly. Like those sprinters, they still had signs of the injury on the MRI, but they were feeling okay.
Exactly. And it just suggests, there's so much more to understanding hamstring recovery than just looking at a scan or measuring strength.
It's so interesting. Okay, so recommendations for treatment and recovery. What do they say? What's the big takeaway there?
Well, they really stress the importance of taking all hamstring strains seriously.
Oh, wow.
Even those ones that seem really minor at first.
Yeah.
It's tempting to just push through it,
Oh, yeah.
especially when you're eager to stay active.
Totally. So you're saying even if it feels like, just a little twinge, we should still pay attention.
Absolutely. Those early days and weeks after an injury, they're super crucial for the long-term healing process.
Gotcha.
And one of the most important things that they recommend is to be really, really cautious in that early state. So we're talking about 4 to 10 days after that initial injury.
Okay, and why that time frame specifically? What's going on in the muscle, though?
But that's often when those initial symptoms start to, kind of calm down a little bit.
Right.
even though underneath that healing process, it's still in full swing.
So you start to feel better, and maybe you think you're good to go full force again.
And that, my friend, is the danger zone.
Uh-oh.
It's so easy to be fooled by that, early reduction in pain and swelling, but pushing too hard too soon, it can actually disrupt those healing tissues,
I know.
and that just increases your risk of re-injury.
It's like you're trying to rush a souffle, right? You've just got to let it bake.
Exactly. That's such a good analogy. Patience is key here. And having a really good rehab plan that gradually increases your activity level, without overloading those poor healing hamstrings, it's crucial.
And that's probably where, working with a physical therapist or an athletic trainer who really knows their stuff,
Yeah.
that becomes really important.
Right.
And it can help you navigate that whole recovery process safely.
100%. And they can also help you figure out if there are other maybe underlying factors that could be contributing to your hamstring issues.
Interesting.
Like, strength imbalances, or maybe you've got some flexibility limitations, or even just movement patterns that need a little tweaking.
Right. So it's not just looking at the hamstring in isolation. It's about the whole system.
Precisely. And that's what I think makes this research so powerful. It reminds us that hamstring injuries, yeah, they're common,
Yeah.
but they're also complex.
So complex. There's just so much happening that we don't even realize.
So much.
Well, I am amazed and also, slightly terrified of my own hamstrings
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, to be honest. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think just listen to your body.
Yeah.
Whether you're, a seasoned athlete or just starting to, explore movement and exercise, just paying attention to those little cues that your body sends. It's crucial.
Yeah, those whispers.
Yes, exactly. Don't ignore pain. But also remember that pain isn't always a perfect indicator of healing.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot. How can you push yourself a little bit, but still respect those limits? And never, never hesitate to reach out for help from a qualified healthcare professional. They can help you navigate all the complexities of injury, recovery, all of that.
Couldn't agree more. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the wonderfully wild world of hamstring injuries.
Yeah.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious.